I want to talk to us, women of color, who've been taught, often without words, that to be worthy, we must perform. To be palatable, we must shrink ourselves. To be successful, we must strive without ceasing.
We are represented. We are represented. We are represented.
Welcome to Represented, the podcast. I'm Aniki Shuru, racial equity coach for online business owners who want to be intentionally inclusive by building a business that is racially equitable. I created this podcast to normalize a conversation around racial inclusion so that fear is no longer the barrier that gets in the way of doing this work. This isn't about perfection, it's about progress. Whether you're taking your first steps or you're well-versed in the journey towards racial equity, this space is for you. So welcome home, friend. Let's get started.
From coast to coast, around the globe, we are represented.
Hey there, lovely. Welcome back to another episode of Represented Podcast. Now, over the last couple of weeks, I've been sharing about colonialism, talking about its history, its relationship with the coaching industry, and most recently, how to do business without a colonial mindset. From all that conversation, what has been brewing inside of me is a conversation specifically for women of color, because the impact of colonialism has meant changing our identity in order to fit the status quo, as you know, and also as a way of survival. And so today, I want to talk to us, women of color, who've been taught, often without words, that to be worthy, we must perform. To be palatable, we must shrink ourselves. To be successful, we must strive without ceasing. Now, this episode is a little personal, and I want to start with a little bit of my story, because maybe in hearing mine, you'll feel less alone in your own story. And so the premise of the title, The Performance of Being Enough, stems from the beginning of my story. Living my birth country, Kenya, and moving to Australia. Not because I was running away. And I want to say that because often I get asked, Annie, what brought you to Australia? Or was it that you were getting away from some kind of conflict? Was it due to the perceived poverty that a lot of white folks feel that what they see and consume on the media is a true depiction of what the African continent is and only is that side of things? But it isn't, and that's why I want to say that I wasn't running away, but because like so many other migrants, I was chasing the version of success I'd been told was better, more superior, more valid. I came to Australia to study. And when I arrived, I saw order. I saw structure. I saw systems. And I remember thinking, this is what success looks like. This is what excellence is. I mean, I'm talking about from the immigration department to baggage collection. This is at the airport, to transportation, to my accommodation itself, and then to the public transport that I then got to use. I was in awe of. And also just the culture and being in this land. It was so different. It even smelled different. And I was just in awe. I was just in awe of how things operated, because it was vastly different from what I had been accustomed to what I was used to, what I knew to be my normal. It was hustle, bustle, noise, hooting on the streets, animals on the road. Um, but also, there's the other side that is our order and our culture, and how we do things. And it is beautiful, it is good. But to me, being in this new country, this equaled better. And I was sold. It felt effortless in terms of how things were operating. It felt easier. It looked brighter and better. And so I adapted, and quickly so. And these are things that I did without even being consciously aware of. I softened my Kenyan accent, trying hard to distance myself from the undertones of Kikuyu. That is my mother tongue, because it carried so much of my identity and how I pronounced words, how I formed, the description of things very much was fed from that identity. I felt like I needed to change how I dressed. My African attire made me feel too out there. It just felt a little bit too loud and too foreign. It was easier to just blend in, to wear softer neutrals, even to do with my hairstyle. I felt like I had to have a hairstyle that didn't make me stand out. That way, I didn't attract questions or assumptions about where I came from. And even though I came with braids, at the time they were called Rwandese braids, and they were really, really thin, like needle thin braids, which are absolutely beautiful. After I took them off, after a few months of taking them off, because they needed to be taken off, I just avoided braids and cornrows. And also, I did not live in an area where those kind of services were available to us. But I embraced not having that because I didn't want to be seen as too cultural, too black, too different. And in doing these things, I wasn't doing it intentionally, knowing that that was what I was doing. It was just something that was inside of me that I was doing. And then came the degrees, got my bachelor's and then a master's, because deep down, I believed one wasn't enough. I had to work harder. I was in a system now where um, my identity, my blackness, it worked against me in that I had to work way much harder in the spaces that I occupied, which were predominantly white, in order to be better and overqualified always. I was the woman who arrived at work early. I stayed late. I worked through weekends. I remember having a BlackBerry phone. Do you remember BlackBerry? This was like when mobile phones for work, that was like a thing. And if you are not of that generation, please just just let this one gloss over you. But I remember replying to emails on my BlackBerry after hours and working through, even though I had taken sick days, I still worked during my sick days because I didn't want to risk being seen as lazy or less committed or even putting my job in jeopardy. And when I did leave corporate and become a coach, I brought that same mentality with me. I worked after my kids went to bed, during naps, even on weekends away with family. I took my laptop and I told myself that it was needed to make it in business. And I do feel that to some extent, we need to do these things. We need to work hard. There is a season in life when you just need to Put in everything you can because it's early days. Like when you're a university student, it's early days. You can't just go like, well, yeah, I'm just not going to put in all the effort. I see that and I recognize that. And that is a past me. I am speaking about a past me that right now in my mid 40s, to carry on like that would not be sustainable. It is not sustainable. But I understand that is what needed to be done to make it, and I'm putting air quotes, to make it in life, in business, in the corporate world. And here's the hardest truth of all. I believed, and to some extent, if I'm being really, really honest, I'm still unshackling from the fact that my worth is directly tied to how hard I work and how much I earn. The act of pulling away from this way of thinking and being is honestly a daily practice, one where I have to remind myself that I am enough just as I am. No amount of money or hard work should validate me in that way. And I have to constantly tell myself that. And maybe you're listening to this too, and you're nodding along. You're going, What you're saying, that resonates. And as I've dug deeper to try and understand where all this comes from, because it's more than having personal ambition. It's so much more than just, oh, a strong work ethic. I realize more and more as I read and have conversations with other women of color experiencing the same, that this is a legacy of colonialism and white supremacy. We are taught directly or indirectly that who we are isn't enough, that our language, our dress, our stories, our faith, our traditions, gosh, even our rest, our joy are less than, and that to belong, we must perform, assimilate, overachieve. You see, the more I think about it, colonialism didn't just steal land and labor, it stole worthiness. It replaced our way of being with a metric system of human value, where proximity to whiteness is the goal, and overworking is the ticket. The kind of life costs us, this specific kind of life, it costs us. And for so many women of color, we carry these costs in our bodies. Raise your hand with me if the anxiety of always having to read the room is something you do. The exhaustion of code switching at work, in business, even online. The grief of erasing parts of ourselves to feel safe or successful. You know, that hair straightening, that wearing certain clothes, that, getting rid of that Kikuyu accent, your mother tongue, that erasure so that you can feel safe or successful. The quiet guilt that comes when we slow down as if we are failing. And when rest finally arrives, if it does, it doesn't always feel like relief. Sometimes it feels so unfamiliar and so uncomfortable, like we're betraying the very system we have worked so hard to survive in. These days, shifting my mindset and being from these systems is less about what I do and more about what I no longer feel obligated to do. And it's not just a shift that just happens. Honestly, I think it's a coming of age thing because now in my mid 40s, the things that I hustled for in my 20s, in my 30s, I'm just like, nah, I'm not willing to do that. I feel no, I no longer feel obligated to do them. I simply do not. And what I'm gravitating more to is slowing down. And this is something my coach will tell you I have fought tooth and nail. Never wanted to slow down. To me, slowing down was synonymous with just not being successful. And not for anybody else, just for me. Right now, it's choosing to rest, even when the to-do list isn't done. And that is a hard thing to do. But when I do rest, it feels so much better. It's saying no to urgency. And I still struggle with that. I'm like, oh my God, oh my God. I don't know if it's urgency has just become so part of our system of being that when you say no to it, it honestly feels like you're betraying a part of yourself. So, still learning, but choosing to say no, even when it's uncomfortable. Letting go of over explaining myself. Oh, so why did you do this? Or why are you doing that? Don't need to over explain because it felt right. Personal choice. And that is enough. I don't need to go into a whole story, history as to why. It's wearing what feels good on my body and my soul. Wow. That one just hits hard because it involves embracing my natural hair with its coils, its puffiness right now, and it's sprinkled with grays. There's kind of like a salt and pepper situation going on with my hair. And it feels good to just embrace that and not fight it. Something else that feels good is being Black and Christian and business minded without having to compartmentalize any of it. That's something I've done, embracing being Black in certain spaces and not in others, embracing being Christian in certain spaces and toning it down in others, being business minded in certain areas and then in others not being. And now just the freedom to just be all of it. This is who I am. But I also want to make it clear that this kind of life in my mid 40s, to say these things and to be able to live these things or to strive to some of these things that I still haven't quite gotten there is a privilege. Not everyone has access to this. I get that. Because for many, and I have been there, survival is still the priority. I see that, I get it. And even as I speak to younger Annie in her 20s, Annie's in her 30s, that would not have been a choice she would have made. She still needed to do what she needed to do and kind of come of age to where she is right now. And so the question becomes, how do we survive while also moving forward towards a life of nourishment, contentment, enoughness, and joy? And there's some words that I didn't realize actually make me feel a certain way, like nourishment. What is nourishment? I felt like that was something that is for other people and not for me because I just felt like I'm on this uh, life cycle that requires me to do. And nourishment will come when it comes. But right now, nourishment is not for me. But I am now in that place, in that phase of life where I'm inviting nourishment. I'm having to redefine what nourishment means because what nourishment might mean for you might not be the same as what it means for me. I'm trying to discover what that is. And contentment. being content with what I have and not just chasing the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, only to acquire it to then want the next thing. No, just being grounded in contentment, enoughness, and joy, like deep down joy. And often the place that my mind goes to is back home in the village, where my parents grew up. There's just so much contentment when I think of my grandparents when they were alive, just the things they were content with, the enoughness, there was just so much of togetherness, the sharing. People popped in. Nobody called to say they were coming. First of all, there were no phones. They just popped in. They checked in. They brought stuff. When they harvested food, it was shared. It was community done differently. And aren't those things that were destabilized through colonialism? And now we're kind of trying to get back to our own way of community sharing. And so that's the question I want to really hold gently in this conversation. And in the spirit of slowing down, not to rush an answer, but to sit with it, to listen for it. And that question being, how do we survive while also moving towards a life of nourishment, contentment, enoughness, and joy? The performance of being enough. Just sit with that. Invite your inner being, your spirit, to speak into it. You don't have to rush to answer this question. I don't think there is even a conclusive answer like, this is how we get there, Annie. How do we survive while also moving forward toward a life of nourishment, contentment, enoughness, and joy? I think that will take time to just unpack and unpack and unpack. And so sit with that one, my friend, and see where it leads you. And if this episode is touching something tender in you, I want you to know you're not alone. The performance you've carried was never, ever your fault, and it doesn't have to be your future. I'm thinking in the next episode, we'll talk more about the idea of survival versus nourishment, because I feel like we need to unpack that a little bit more, and how to hold both with grace. And if you're a woman of color listening and you're craving a space where you don't have to explain yourself, a space to breathe, a space to pray and connect, I would love to have a space like that. And I'm dreaming that up. A community that integrates faith, life, and purpose. It's early days. It even feels a little bit scary sharing that, because I don't know how or what it will look like, or if ever this is something that even sees the light of day. But if your spirit is saying yes, then my invitation is to stay close. I'll be sharing more soon. But if you're like, Annie, I want to know more. What are you thinking, girl? Send me a DM over on IG, Instagram. My handle is annie.kishir, and you can find it on the show notes. But my friend, my sister, I hope this episode has really met you exactly where you are and left you feeling so much better. Until next time, take care of yourself.
We are represented. We are represented. We are
so much for tuning in. Why don't you go ahead and hit that subscribe button and leave a review so this podcast can reach more online business owners, and together we can begin to normalize racial inclusion in the online coaching space. I'd love to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where this podcast episode was recorded, the Wiradjuri people in central New South Wales, Australia. Music produced in Nairobi, Kenya by Patrick St. P. Mbaru and Kambua Mathu. Vocals by Joanne Matata.
Represented from coast to coast.